I'm not matching profiles, I'm matching people.
How far are you willing to go to become you? I'm asked that same question every morning. The connection has been lost to each other and to ourselves. Toxicity continues to rise while self-worth continues to fall. This was created out of sheer necessity, the desire to create change and curve the culture back to connection. My journey has rerouted my idea of who I'm becoming. Connection begins within, continues outward. Love you, then love me, in that order. If I'm about to get uncomfortable, then so are you. I'm learning who I am. Now I want to get to know you. Connection over convenience.
So I loved your interviews while I'm fucking with this. Okay.
I love your rawness.
You know. Just wait. Okay, I'm just going to stop messing with it. There we go. Okay, close enough.
Do you have any idea what you're in for now that you got a taste of what I do?
No, I mean, I listened to a bunch of interviews and they were all different. So, yeah.
Good, here we are. I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's interesting. I've had a chance to start to get into your blog because the LinkedIn kind of directed me to the blog of you'd have these excerpts that were very raw, and then you'd go into the blog and it would finish off a story. And I mean, you have this raw blog about you're talking everything from relationships, dating, trauma, sexual harassment, rape, Me Too movement, and even like I say, from hospital beds to celebrities. You're very vocal about these experiences of what's going on today. And there's this one line that I wrote down. It was from James, and I don't know if that was a real name or not, of someone in your life at the time when you were dating. And you said, he wasn't asking me for drinks. He was asking me if I wanted to fuck him. And I politely declined. And so I knew this was going to be a raw conversations today. And I think you've had a very interesting childhood growing up. Yeah, right.
It's funny. So last year I had dinner with someone I hadn't seen in a long, long time. And we can get into the semantics of this statement, but she was my sister's therapist. And she was never able to tell me because of her role in our lives what she really thought, but now she could. And she said, "Oh yeah, your childhood was a shit show." And I was like, "What?" And she said, "Oh yeah, no, it really was. But when you're in it and you're a kid, you don't know anything different.
That's all you know.
That's all you know." Yeah.
Yeah. Tell me more. Tell me more.
Well, what do you want to know? Ask anything. So
ask anything. Well, I know early on you had to grow up fast because it seemed like you had to take on the mom role for your sister. Is that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I have two siblings. My brother and I have the same parents, and our parents divorced when I was 10 and he was 7. Kind of typical for the 80s. And then my mother and I moved away, and my mother was pregnant with her fiance's child, and her fiance died in a car accident. And he was the great love of my mother's life. It really broke her heart. And so my sister and I have the same mother, but different fathers. And I didn't realize growing up that my mother was a drug addict. And she was a nurse, and she was always so high functioning. And I don't think we do now, but especially then, I don't think we thought about people popping pills as being addicts. But my mother would come home from work and empty her pockets and put everything in this one drawer that we weren't allowed to touch. And in that drawer were alcohol pads and scissors and vials of liquid. And our kitchen cabinets looked like a pharmacy. And I thought every nurse did this. Like I thought, well, that's the norm. That's what people do.
How old are you at this time?
Oh, 10, 11, 12.
Okay.
I mean, I thought this was normal. And my first indication that something was terribly wrong with my mother, and this is in my book, and I'll try not to tear up because it's such a horrible memory, was when I was in high school. And at this point, it's just me and my mom and my sister. And I had been out, and I came home, and my sister is 2 years old, if that, maybe younger, because she was still in diapers. And she could barely stand, and she was just swaying, and she looked drunk. And I was horrified, and I grabbed her, and I was like, and I had taken care of her, since she was born. And I was like, we got to take her to the hospital, something's wrong. And my mom tells me that she gave my sister an injection, and that she was going to be fine because she was a nurse and she knew just how much to give. And it was to quiet my sister because she was fussy and didn't want to go to sleep. And I was just stunned. And I was driving at that point, so I was 16. And that's when I knew my mother was not normal. That was that first moment. And I made my mother swear that she would never do that again as long as I was there. But when I was 18, I left. As soon as I turned 18, I left 4 days later and went across the country. I went to Los Angeles for college and stayed. And after I left home, my mother's drug habit got worse, and things went downhill from there. And eventually she did lose her nursing license because she was caught shooting morphine at work. And after that, things just kind of fell apart for my mom. And my sister came out to visit me for what was supposed to be a 2-week Christmas vacation in December 1994. And I was 22 years old at this time and graduated from school. And it turned into a permanent stay because my mother didn't want to be a mother anymore. And those were her exact words. And she said, don't put her on the flight home.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up all over the Southeast. So my parents met in the Air Force. So I like to say that I lived in like every small town you've never heard of. But both of my parents are from the Southeast. And that's why my mother and I, when my parents split up, my mother and I went to Alabama. That's where she's from. And my dad and my stepmother and my brother actually were in Arkansas.
Going from that area cross country to LA, was that an absolute shock for you of lifestyle change?
It was. I went to student orientation a few weeks before. So it's like 3-day orientation. And the moment I stepped foot on that campus at USC, honestly, I felt like I was home. Okay. I was like, these are my people. And I really did want to move as far away from my mother as I possibly could. And that's about 2,000 miles. So
was this the first time of being independent?
Yes.
And was this the first time where you really got a chance to live independently? Like, you went way beyond being independent at that time, or?
100%. Yeah. My mother said I couldn't leave home until I was 18, and my birthday's at the end of the summer. And 4 days after my birthday, I packed up my car and I left. And the hardest part about leaving was leaving my sister.
Yeah.
She was 4 at the time, and that was the hardest part.
And how long were you away for?
I was away for, me personally?
Yeah.
I stayed in LA over 20 years. I only moved back to the South 5 years ago. And I never thought I would. So, but I'm here.
Yeah. And where are you now?
I'm in Birmingham, actually, the city where my sister was born.
Okay. And so she stayed with you for a time being, and you took on the role of taking care of her full time.
Yeah, so I became her only parent and her legal guardian, and I raised my sister all through my 20s, and I raised her until 1 month after her 15th birthday. She was finishing her freshman year of high school, and she was diagnosed with stage 4 liver cancer. And it was just a shock. The day before she had been fine, no pain, there were no signs, no symptoms. And then an ER doctor says she has tumors in her liver and lungs, and we're loaded into an ambulance and sent to Children's Hospital Los Angeles. And that was day 1 of Adrian's 147-day cancer journey. She died a few months after my 29th birthday. And by the time I turned 30, I completely changed the course of my life, because matter to me before didn't matter at that point. And I was really lost.
She was with you in LA?
In LA. Mm-hmm.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, I raised her in LA. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And this, after everything happened, this think set you off on a completely different path, a completely different journey.
Totally different journey. Yeah. When I was raising Adrian, I was pursuing an acting career. And then I was also a teacher to mainly be on her schedule, but it also gave me the flexibility to pursue acting. And the year before she was diagnosed was my busiest year yet. I had acted in 3 plays. I was actually getting known as a director in theater in Los Angeles and getting paid just a little bit to direct theater, which is unheard of. And she was my set designer, my prop master. I mean, she could make anything I wanted. She was an amazing artist herself. And yeah, and then actually when she was diagnosed, a show that I had directed had just opened, and I had to walk away from the show and just hand it off to somebody else.
You were documenting the journey with you and her through the 147 days. Is that what it is? It's essentially it's documenting those last days.
Yeah, you mean the book?
Yes.
Yeah. So, last fall, my medical memoir, Better Off Bald: A Life in 147 Days, was published, and I initially didn't structure the book the way it is now, but now it is written like a journal where the days are actually chapters. And I did it that way because, like you said, I kept a medical journal the entire time she was sick. And I was very meticulous and very detailed about everything that was going on. But also, she was a writer, and she had started an online journal before she ever got sick and kept it going. And I thought it was a great way for people to see not only my point of view as the caregiver and parent, but also her point of view as this teenager with cancer. And so by day 3, every chapter is introduced with her point of view and her actual words that either come from her online journal or the journals that she wrote. I mean, she had paper journals too. And there are even some drawings and poetry, in the book. And yeah, I guess it worked out because people seem to like it.
That's beautiful. And now you're at this time 30 or so. You're in LA, and now you're by yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, does that just set you off on who the fuck am I, or what am I going to do, or is it like, or is it like liberating? Is it a fuck you to everybody else? What goes on at that moment?
Well, I lived my life backwards. So I raised a child in my 20s. I got married in my 30s, got divorced and started business in my 40s. So just totally backwards. I was on my way to an audition, and I realized I didn't care anymore. And so I did act for several more years after Adrian died, but I just didn't care. And I really needed a way to channel my grief. I had gotten incredibly suicidal, and I called the largest liver disease nonprofit in the country. They had a greater Los Angeles chapter, and I said, look, I want to help. My background's writing and marketing, and I'm a great teacher, and I want to create something for you with liver cancer. And they said, we don't do liver cancer. And it's just amazing how like one thing can just change your whole life, because if this organization had done something with liver cancer, I just would have been a volunteer. I mean, when I was a little girl, I did not say, I want to grow up and start a charity. I mean, no one says that, right? So, but that's what happened. They refused to do a program, and no matter how hard I pushed or how hard I tried. And I hung up the phone. I knew there wasn't a single other organization in the entire country doing anything about this specific cancer that killed my sister, which happens to be the most common liver cancer in the world. It just wasn't very prominent in the U.S. at the time. And Lily Tomlin has this great saying. It goes something like, I realized somebody should do something about that, and I realized that somebody is me. And that's exactly what happened. And so I ended up starting my nonprofit, Blue Fairy, the Adrian Wilson Liver Cancer Association, early 2003. And it was much more of a passion than a vocation, but it definitely got me started down a totally different career path.
I wonder if that, I'll call it like that rebelness in you, is what actually caused you to say, because they're not going to do it, fuck you, I'm going to start this myself. Everything. It's a life experience of everything you went through. All these different experiences gave you that grit to say, fine. If you're not going to do it, guess what? I'm going to do it.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm the most persistent person I know. That's for sure.
Yeah. There's been a tremendous amount of stories that you've had throughout your life that you've written in the Me Too movement, and you've published quite a few of them through your blog. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've never seen one person have so many experiences and just be vocal with it, put them out there I mean, these things happen every day, but you put them out there. Do you have a lot of people that will say, thank you for sharing your story? I too have had my experience that I didn't want to say anything, and you're able to invite them in to actually project their voice now?
Well, what's interesting about the Me Too movement is I didn't think about my Me Too moments until that happened. And that's how I sort of titled the blog, how the movement made me remember all of these Me Too moments. And I think as a woman, maybe not a young woman today would do this, but a woman my age, in my 40s, I really took it for granted. I took for granted the abusive boyfriend and the date rape. The only one that I didn't take for granted that I knew was wrong, that was the most embarrassing, that I was the most ashamed of, that I had never actually said anything about or told anyone about, was the nurse, the male nurse, when I was in the hospital after an emergency appendectomy. That was the first time when I wrote in my blog that I had actually just told anyone. And I was just mortified by it because I just didn't think, I just couldn't believe it happened. And even then, when I published a series on LinkedIn, like you said, I put excerpts on LinkedIn, someone questioned me on it and said, well, a nurse needs to touch you. And, it's like, well, read the whole blog post.
I mean, out of curiosity, was it a female or male that left that comment?
I think it was a male.
I mean, if you read that excerpt, even the expert, it was very detailed. It wasn't a nurse just taking care of you. It was very detailed.
Yeah, it was.
So you have this unhealthy relationship after unhealthy relationships, all these abusive relationships that you're in. What happens where you're able to do the inner work to walk away from this and take the moment to figure out who you are so you don't enter into another unhealthy relationship again? What was that final thing that really caused you to walk away from the unhealthiness of your life at that time?
Well, when Adrian came into my life in Los Angeles, I was living with a very destructive alcoholic boyfriend. And again, I really didn't know how bad it was. And when she ended up staying with us, I didn't want to improve my life for myself, but I definitely wanted to for her. And so I started to make changes. I started going to Alcoholics, Al-Anon, I think it is, right? And
were you drinking at the time as well?
I was, but I'm a social drinker. Yeah. I mean, I couldn't drink like this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, like not even close. And
so there wasn't an addiction with you. It was
no,
with him. Yeah.
No. And but addiction certainly runs in my family for sure. And so I went to see this therapist at the West Side Clinic, and it was free because I was so poor. And I only had 2 appointments with this guy. And the first appointment was like sort of that intake, 45 to 60 minutes. The second appointment, he clarified things so perfectly for me that I told him he was never going to make a living as a therapist if he continued this way. Because most of the time your problems aren't solved right away. But that second appointment, he just said to me, do you see the connection between your mother, your college boyfriend, who was in that blog post series, and this guy now? Do you understand that you were raised to enable people and take care of them, and you are attracted to addicts of all different kinds? And it was this huge light bulb moment. Yeah, just like that. And I couldn't believe, I still remember being there and with this guy, and I was just in awe and stunned. And I said, well, I didn't until just now. And I really didn't. I didn't understand how I enabled that behavior. I didn't understand. And not long after that, I got out of that relationship.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's different. You can understand something, but not do anything to make the change.
Well,
it had enough impact on you to put everything together to say, I need to get out of this.
Oh yeah, and he had almost beat me up several times, and I knew if he was going to beat me up, he would eventually hit Adrian. So that was a no-brainer.
Was that the beginning of your journey into, I would say, self-worth and self-love?
I don't think so, because I was so focused on her. She was my number one priority, and so part of what happened when she died, and maybe a lot of parents go through this when they have that empty nest syndrome, but I got thrust into that and thrust into grief, and she was always the priority, and I always identified myself as a parent first, and I lost who I was. I mean, I really did. I really didn't have any grounding at all, and it was really difficult for a long time, for a very long time.
Yeah. And this is now your early 30s, right?
Yeah, early 30s. Yeah, yeah. I was in a relationship when Adrian got sick. Actually, been in a relationship for several years. He was the only father figure Adrian ever had, but I knew without her we wouldn't stay together. And I really feel like we were brought together for her, and she adored him. And our relationship ended 2 years after she died. And I went almost immediately into another relationship with a person I ended up marrying, who is a good man, but not the right man for me. And I know that if I had not been grieving so terribly, that I wouldn't have married him ever. I wouldn't have happened. And a part of me, I think, wanted to be normal and have a normal life. And I said this statement to that same woman last year, to Adrian's therapist, and she said, "But you're not normal." I was like, "Oh, okay, well, okay, there's that. You're not normal." So I got married in my 30s, and to someone who just wasn't the right person for me.
How long were you guys married for?
We were married, I guess technically 9 years.
You wanted it so bad. You wanted that check off on marriage of this is how it should be. But it wasn't how you wanted it once you were inside it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We would have been much better off being friends. Yeah.
And that brought you into your 40s.
Brought me into my 40s, yeah.
Just getting started. And if I'm not mistaken, I one of the stories I read too was that you met somebody from 12 hours away, somewhere around that.
I wrote about that too. Gosh, yeah. So I left Los Angeles with no plan whatsoever, and it really was about the journey. It was not about the destination. I ended up in Birmingham just because I knew people here, and it's about a day's drive from my family, which I think is really important. I think it's good to have a day's drive between you and your relatives if possible. But my dad and stepmom are in Arkansas, so they're right next door. And so I ended up here, and about 6 months after I moved here, I met someone through a mutual acquaintance on email, of all things. And it wasn't like a setup or anything like that. And
on email.
Email.
Give me some more details on the email. How does this happen? Like this email randomly comes in?
Yeah, it's just a mutual acquaintance introduced us on email, and we just started talking, and there was just something there.
What happens? They forward you an email? Give me how does an email arrive to you? They forward you this?
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it wasn't social media, because he's not a big social media person. So I think that's what it was. And he just got my sense of humor right away. And that was actually a sticking point in my marriage. My ex-husband never got my sense of humor. And laughing and joy and humor is super important to me. And this guy, like from my first email, got my sense of humor. And there was just something there. So, but I didn't think anything about it because, yeah, he lived in South Florida. He lived in Fort Lauderdale, near Miami. I mean, it was so far away. And after emailing for 3 or 4 weeks, I get this email that says, "How would you feel if I drove up there and took you out on a date?" And my gut reaction, which I told him later, was like, yes. And at that point, I had already, my ex-husband already filed the papers, and we were going through a divorce. So I felt okay with going on a date in that respect. And yeah, and we just celebrated 5 years actually last week.
Congratulations!
Thank you.
This reminds me so much of, is it the Tom Hanks and Meg Ryan? Is
Yes.
that
You
right?
got me. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, off of now. When did you guys actually talk? I mean, you guys are going back and forth through emails. At some point, did you talk on the phone?
We decided we had to talk before we actually went out on a date.
So it was pretty close to the time where he drove up.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing it was a long, great conversation.
Yeah.
I mean, it transferred from email right to voice and phone, and it just kind of carried on like that.
It totally did.
That's beautiful. And look at you guys now.
Yeah. And I didn't know where it was going to go. I'm not a fan of long distance relationships. And I told him, look, I just moved here. I'm just trying to figure my life out. I'm starting over. I am not going to move to South Florida. Like, that is just not happening. And we'll just see where this goes. And in my mind, it was, if I have a great 6 months or a year with this person, great. I'm happy. And I think by our third date, so we saw each other like once a month. I think by our third date, he said, "How would you feel if I ended up moving here?" And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's an idea." And so he waited until his youngest had graduated from high school and moved here.
It's a beautiful story.
Which doesn't sound like a big deal, but he had lived in the same place his entire life. So
that's huge. He was willing to pick up and leave all he knew.
Yeah. And his mother still likes me, so that's good.
That's a great thing. Happy anniversary. This is amazing.
Yeah.
I love this story. I love the happy ending, and you're just getting started too in life.
Yeah. It's funny. When we were out for our anniversary, we actually got to go to a restaurant, which was super exciting, which won't make any sense depending on when you're listening to this podcast. But it was exciting to go to a restaurant where we didn't have to wear a mask and we could actually eat real food. And this bartender who was serving us gave us, the first round was on her because of our anniversary, and she asked about our story. And she just kept saying gross, which was so funny to us because she was like, "Wow, that's just so gross. That's so gross." And then she had already been married twice, and she was pretty young. And I just told her, I said, you'll find the one. I said, it might not happen till you're a lot older, but you will.
It's worth the wait.
It's worth the wait. Absolutely.
Do you feel today completely aligned with purpose of where you are, what you're doing, what you're supposed to be doing, and like, this is me today. I'm fully comfortable and embrace who I am today?
Yes. Faults and all. Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it the most liberating experience when you get to that point?
Yes. Yes, it really, really is.
Yeah. It completely changes perspective on everything. It's just the most liberating, freeing place to be.
Yeah. On that note, when I decided to leave Los Angeles, it was the first time that I really, truly did not care anymore what people thought. And my ex-husband, to his credit, was incredibly supportive, but no one else was. No one. And I got just so much shit from everybody. I mean, really, and from all directions. And I just didn't care because people got so hung up on where I was moving. And I was like, no. It is not about moving to Alabama. It really is just about leaving Los Angeles and going wherever I need to go next. And that drive across the country was amazing for me. It was awesome. Yeah. And it was just me and my cat and a couple suitcases and 2,000 miles. And it turns out that I really do love driving if there's no traffic. Go figure.
Something new. Isn't it incredible that people will, I mean, everybody's going to give you their opinion and they're judging you on this and this, and the majority of people will give in and live somebody else's life.
Yes.
And I see it every single day.
Yeah.
So many unhappy people because they're living somebody else's life until they can officially, as I call unwiring, rewiring the brain, cut everything, all the negative emotions out of their body, all the negative thoughts, everybody else's opinions, and just live their life. Because we hear it we're getting pulled in every which direction. Your friends, your family.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing to do. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, but
whose life you're living though? At the end of the day, you have to live your life. Yeah. And had you listened to everybody else, you wouldn't have been here today. You wouldn't have been 5 years in on a marriage and everything. You wouldn't have been here.
Yeah. No.
You would have wound up where they wanted you, and your life would have been completely different.
I would probably be divorced, living in Los Angeles, and miserable.
Yeah.
Because I really was tired of LA and had been for many years, and I didn't have any family in California, neither did my ex-husband, and I didn't have a whole lot of close friends, and so there was really nothing, keeping me in LA anymore.
It was just familiar to at the time. You didn't know. I mean, at that time, that was in a way, LA at first was your kind of hideaway from it all. It's a place you went to get away from all the toxic environment that you knew in life. And ultimately it became its own toxic environment at that point, once over the years. And it's interesting because a lot of times, because it's so, even though it's toxic, it's familiar. That's all we know. So we stay in those environments and you're able to walk away from it.
People hate change, don't they?
They do.
I think that is everyone's single biggest fear. I think you can take almost any fear and you drill down, and it's the fear of change. And I still remember this moment when, and this was just a few weeks before, where I just said, I'm going to leave. I was in my kitchen. We lived in this house that was built in 1946 that was like constantly falling apart. And we rented, we had like really cheap rent. It was one of those, as long as you don't complain about stuff falling apart, we won't raise your rent kind of situation. And we lived in Burbank, which is a great sort of little city by itself inside of Los Angeles that's close to everything. So we loved Burbank. And I just remember thinking I would be better off dead. And I hadn't been suicidal in years. But I was just, I'd be better off dead. I was that unhappy. And then I realized, wait a minute, why, what is this really about? And I just had to change my environment. That was the single biggest change that I could make that would shake my whole life up. And it worked. It totally worked.
That's a strong place to be. I mean, to be at that low, saying that I'd be better off dead. I mean, I get chills just thinking about when somebody gets to that place.
Yeah, it's certainly not a fun place, right? I mean, yeah. And there was a part of me too so I wrote my book in my sister's bedroom, in the room she died in. And so I was still living in that house where she died, even though she only lived in that house a few months and a few weeks really. And a part of me for a long time thought if I left LA that I was somehow leaving her. And that was really hard for me. And I don't feel that way anymore. I do go back to LA every year. I was just looking at airfare last night. I go back every year on Halloween because that was her favorite holiday. And I stay for usually 5 days tops and visit her grave. And that's just enough. Like, it's just enough time to see people. Although this time around, I think it's going to be a very different situation. I don't know if I'll be able to see anybody, but and it's, it's enough to go, yeah, there are things about LA I still like, and then I leave and I come home.
You have your own life now.
Yep.
it might be the first time in your life where you have your own life now.
Yeah. Yeah. Very different.
What a beautiful story.
Thank you.
I'm so happy for you that you're here today. And
Aw.
like literally here today having a conversation. I know we did this pretty last minute, and I really appreciate the flexibility. Yeah, thank you so much. We're now. What's next, do you think, for you?
Oh, goodness.
What do you have
well,
to do?
What's that?
What are something that you just have to do this life that you need to do?
Oh, bucket list type
Yeah.
thing? Oh, Italy. Like 4 to 6 weeks in Italy
Yeah.
with sort of no plan. But I have no idea what the world's going to look like. I mean, it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, I mean, I hope we get back to whatever this new normal is going to look like, where people actually get to, shake hands again.
I guess even beyond a bucket list of like just you and your purpose, what do you absolutely need to accomplish in this life now?
My goal with Cancer University is to create a powerful, sustained movement that changes cancer care in America. And because that's the only thing that's going to do it. And I think if you look back at other movements in the past, it was only when people truly came together that things changed. And I think the AIDS movement is a fantastic example of that. And most people may not know this, but there is a line item in the budget, the Ryan White Act, and it is untouchable, this line item in the budget, even though AIDS for most people is well managed now. It's foreseen as a chronic disease. I mean, it's very different than it was 20, 30 years ago, but there is an untouchable line item in our federal budget that gets increased every year just automatically, where that money goes toward AIDS and AIDS research. And that was not an easy undertaking or easy task. And I'm not saying government is going to necessarily solve the problem either, but that happened because everyone who cared about the AIDS movement and patients and those people who lost people to AIDS all came together in this movement and fought really hard for a change. And with cancer, it's just such a different animal. And yeah, we have a long way to go.
I like to call it an energetic tidal wave of bringing all this positive energy of people who have the power to make a difference all together to create this just massive tidal wave and channel all this energy into the right place, in the same place. You know, the line goes for 𝗦𝗲𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗕𝗘, who's somebody who I really respect, and he says, where your awareness goes, your energy flows. And when you take all this energy and you put it into one place,
now I know where my yoga teacher got that from.
𝗦𝗲𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗕𝗘. You can look like a hero tomorrow in yoga class. You're like, 𝗦𝗲𝗕𝗦𝗖𝗥𝗕𝗘 says that. He's a monk who's one of my favorite people. But yes, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now you got to tell me why the name of your podcast.
XXO.
Yeah, XXO. Yeah.
Why the name? Well, it's the name of when I was creating my company, and this was back last April. I was just going through a bunch of different names, and the names were just not sticking with me. And I was just driving in my car, and it just came to me, XXO. I like more of the it's love, XO, XX. It's a play on love, which everything about me is connection. Love is connection, and it just had a ring with me. I just loved it, XXO. I thought it was different than saying a word. I like how it sounds, how it feels. But it's love, and my whole company is about connection, which is to me the root of it all.
Okay,
Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, on that note, I do have a gift for your listeners. I didn't know if we were that point in the podcast
Go for
yet
it.
or not. But
please, I appreciate that.
Yeah. So we're in this interesting stage with Cancer U where we're past our beta and our pilots got delayed because of COVID, but they're restarting. But it allows us to offer free lifetime memberships to Cancer U. So if any of your listeners are a newly diagnosed cancer patient or the caregiver of a newly diagnosed cancer patient, if they go to cancer.university and click apply now, they just fill out the application, and then at the very bottom it says, I have a coupon code. So if they just click on that and they put in the coupon code XXO podcast, so all caps but all one word, XXO podcast, they'll get a free lifetime membership.
That's amazing. Thank you so much. I'll definitely run this in its own little clips so we can get the word out there. That's amazing.
Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course.
Good stuff. I appreciate you. I appreciate everything you were doing, making a change in the culture, and we all appreciate that. So thank you. Thank you for spending some time with me today.
You're welcome.
Wasn't too raw.
I was so impressed. You did so much research. So much. That's very impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. I think we're just scratching the surface, but we'll leave it for another podcast time.
Okay. I love it.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
We will talk to you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye.